Europe in 2024 feels eerily familiar. The shadow of the Cold War has returned, casting a long shadow over the continent. NATO and Russia, once potential partners, are locked in a dangerous dance, their militaries edging closer to direct confrontation. The stakes are higher than ever, with the potential for miscalculation looming large. At the heart of this renewed tension lies the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's invasion in 2022 shattered any illusions of a lasting peace in Europe. NATO, once hesitant to directly confront Russia, has responded with unprecedented unity and resolve. Military aid has flowed into Ukraine, bolstering its defenses and enabling it to hold its own against a larger and better equipped foe. The result is a dangerous standoff. NATO and Russia are engaged in a high-stakes game of chicken, each side probing the other's resolve while trying to avoid a catastrophic collision. NATO faces a delicate balancing act. The alliance must deter further Russian aggression without provoking a wider war. To this end, NATO has significantly increased its military presence in Eastern Europe. Troops and equipment have been deployed to frontline states, reassuring allies and sending a clear message of deterrence to Moscow. Air patrols over the Baltic and Black Seas have been intensified, monitoring Russian military activity. NATO warships are conducting exercises in the Mediterranean and the North Atlantic, showcasing the alliance's naval power. These deployments are not merely symbolic. They represent a credible military force capable of responding swiftly and decisively to any Russian aggression. However, NATO has been careful to avoid any actions that could be perceived as provocative. The alliance has repeatedly stressed that its deployments are defensive in nature and that it has no intention of attacking Russia. Russia's military, once seen as a shadow of its former Soviet self, has undergone a significant transformation in recent years. Under Putin's leadership, Russia has invested heavily in modernizing its armed forces, acquiring new weapons systems, and improving training and readiness. The conflict in Ukraine has provided a stark demonstration of Russia's renewed military capabilities. Russia has deployed a wide range of advanced weaponry in Ukraine, including tanks, artillery, and aircraft. It has also demonstrated its willingness to use cyber attacks and information warfare to achieve its objectives. However, Russia's military campaign in Ukraine has not gone entirely according to plan. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by Western weapons and training, have put up fierce resistance. The conflict has exposed weaknesses in Russia's military, including logistical problems and a reliance on outdated equipment. Despite these setbacks, Russia remains a formidable military power. It possesses a vast nuclear arsenal which it has not hesitated to threaten to use if its security is threatened. The conflict between NATO and Russia is not confined to the battlefield. Both sides are engaged in a fierce information war, seeking to shape the narrative and win over public opinion at home and abroad. This battle is being fought on multiple fronts, from traditional media outlets to social media platforms. Russia has a long history of using propaganda and disinformation to advance its interests. In the current conflict, Russia has accused NATO of being the aggressor, claiming that the alliance is using Ukraine as a pawn to weaken Russia. NATO, for its part, has accused Russia of spreading false and misleading information about the conflict. The alliance has highlighted Russian war crimes in Ukraine and has sought to expose Russian propaganda efforts. NATO has also emphasized the importance of freedom of speech and a free press, contrasting these values with Russia's authoritarian system. The information war is having a significant impact on public opinion. In Russia, state-controlled media has been effective in rallying support for the war effort. The conflict between NATO and Russia has also spilled over into the economic realm. Both sides have imposed sanctions and engaged in other forms of economic warfare in an attempt to weaken the other. These measures have had a significant impact on both economies, but their long-term effects remain to be seen. The West has imposed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, targeting its financial system, energy sector, and key industries. These sanctions have had a devastating impact on the Russian economy, leading to a sharp decline in the value of the ruble, soaring inflation, and a shortage of essential goods. Russia has responded with its own economic countermeasures. It has cut off gas supplies to Europe, leading to an energy crisis in some countries. Russia has also threatened to default on its foreign debt, which would have significant repercussions for the global financial system. The economic war between NATO and Russia is a high-stakes game with no clear winner. Both sides are suffering economically, and the conflict is having a ripple effect on the global economy. Despite the escalating tensions, diplomatic channels between NATO and Russia remain open, albeit largely ineffective. Both sides have engaged in sporadic talks, but there has been little progress towards a resolution of the crisis. NATO has repeatedly called on Russia to de-escalate the situation by withdrawing its forces from Ukraine and engaging in meaningful negotiations. The alliance has also made it clear that it is willing to engage in dialogue with Russia, but only if it is based on respect for international law and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Russia, for its part, has shown little interest in meaningful negotiations. Moscow has insisted that any talks must recognize its annexation of Crimea and its control over the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. The result is a diplomatic deadlock, with both sides entrenched in their positions and unwilling to make concessions. The conflict between NATO and Russia is not limited to the physical world. Both sides are engaged in a constant cyber battle, probing each other's defenses, stealing information, and disrupting critical infrastructure. The cyber domain has become a key battleground in the 21st century, and the stakes are high. Russia has a long history of cyber attacks against NATO members. In recent years, Russia has been linked to attacks on government agencies, banks, and critical infrastructure in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere. NATO has responded to the growing cyber threat by strengthening its cyber defenses and developing its own offensive cyber capabilities. The alliance has also made it clear that it considers cyber attacks to be acts of war, and that it will respond accordingly. However, the attribution of cyber attacks remains a major challenge, making it difficult to deter or respond to them effectively. Cyber attacks can disrupt critical infrastructure, steal sensitive information, and sow chaos and confusion. As the conflict between NATO and Russia intensifies, the cyber dimension is likely to become even more important. The escalating tensions between NATO and Russia are not just a product of geopolitical rivalry. Domestic politics in both Russia and the West are also playing a significant role in fueling the conflict. Leaders on both sides have used the crisis to bolster their own domestic standing and deflect attention from internal problems. In Russia, Putin has used the conflict in Ukraine to rally support for his rule. He has presented the war as a necessary measure to defend Russia from Western aggression and has used state-controlled media to spread propaganda and demonize the West. The conflict has allowed Putin to crack down on domestic dissent and consolidate his grip on power. In the West, some leaders have used the crisis to boost their own political fortunes. They have adopted hawkish stances towards Russia, calling for increased military spending and a tougher stance against Putin. The conflict has also been used to stoke fears about Russian aggression and to justify increased surveillance and security measures. This makes it even more difficult to find a peaceful resolution to the crisis. To understand the current tensions, it's crucial to consider Russia's perspective. Moscow sees NATO's eastward expansion as a betrayal of post-Cold War promises and a direct threat to its security. The alliance's military presence in Eastern Europe, from Russia's viewpoint, is not defensive but provocative. Russia feels increasingly encircled and threatened by NATO's actions. It views the West's support for Ukraine as part of a larger strategy to weaken and ultimately dismember Russia. This perception is fueled by historical grievances and a deep-seated mistrust of the West. From Moscow's perspective, the West is not interested in genuine dialogue or a peaceful resolution. Understanding Russia's perspective does not excuse its actions, but it does provide important context for the current crisis. Ignoring Russia's concerns or dismissing them as illegitimate will only exacerbate tensions and make a peaceful resolution more elusive. The escalating tensions between NATO and Russia raise the specter of a direct military confrontation, a chilling prospect with potentially catastrophic consequences. While both sides insist they want to avoid war, the risks of miscalculation and misunderstanding are high. The deployment of significant military forces in close proximity increases the risk of an accidental clash. A single incident, whether a border incursion, a mid-air collision, or a cyber attack, could spiral out of control, leading to a wider conflict. The lack of communication and trust between NATO and Russia exacerbates the risks. Misinterpretations of intentions and capabilities could lead to escalation. Without clear channels of communication and de-escalation mechanisms, even minor incidents could have unintended and dangerous consequences. The potential use of nuclear weapons, however remote, adds another layer of risk. The current standoff between NATO and Russia is unsustainable and dangerous. Finding a path towards de-escalation and dialogue is essential to avert a catastrophic conflict. This will require both sides to make difficult choices and demonstrate a willingness to compromise. NATO must remain united and resolute in its support for Ukraine while avoiding actions that could provoke Russia. Clear communication, both public and private, is crucial to avoid misunderstandings and manage potential crises. Russia must recognize that its actions have consequences and that the path to security lies in cooperation, not confrontation. A genuine commitment to dialogue based on mutual respect and a willingness to address legitimate concerns is essential. Confidence-building measures such as arms control agreements and increased military transparency could help to reduce tensions and create a more stable security environment. The stakes are too high for anything less than a concerted effort to find a peaceful resolution.